Thank you so much to Davi for sharing all of that and for those amazing reminders. And just like Sam got to go right before Tamara, I get to go right after Davi. So I asked where babies come from because I heard the question on TV and I could tell from the laugh track that it must be a pretty big deal. And my dad sat me down and explained sexual intercourse in very clinical terms. There were zygotes, there were fallopian tubes, there was a disembodied penis and vagina. There were no humans involved at all. And so when my friend Amy's mom yelled at us to turn off MTV because it was just people having sex on television, we had questions. Sex, sexual intercourse, are these two things related? And if so, is Janet Jackson really having sex on TV? And how does the dancing make the sperm get to the egg? So we did what kids do really well. We hatched a plan. We stole a couple of bathroom passes and we snuck out of our second grade classroom and went to the library to look up sex in the most trusted source we could think of, the encyclopedia. It wasn't there, and we got caught pretty quickly by adults who were not happy with us. Our parents were mortified. Mine because I was a weird and precocious embarrassment to my family. Amy's because she was definitely going to hell. But what we figured out is that we had stumbled across something really, really bad. When you grow up in a small town like I did, people get a sense of you pretty early on in life, and it can be really hard to redefine yourself. And that's a tough reality to look at when you're an awkward kid, like I was. So I was nerdy, I was the fat kid, I was notoriously bad at sports when for so many people in my orbit, sports were the only thing that mattered. And more than anything, I was terrified of people. And to give you an example of the way this social anxiety ruled my life, in 8th grade, I had to do a presentation. It was on architecture. I was really excited about the topic. I had done some real A+ work, but when I got up in front of everybody, in front of every girl I'd ever envied, in front of every boy I'd ever had a crush on, in front of every best friend I'd ever had, I just froze. And then I started to shake and hyperventilate and cry. I had my first panic attack in front of everybody I knew, and I got my first failing grade to go with it. And so by the time I got to high school, my #1 goal in life was to hide. I sat in the back of every class. I stood in the back row of the honors chorus. I skipped parties, I skipped football games, and I also found a kind of neat job where I could hide while all my friends worked at the video store or waiting tables. See, our local chapter of the Red Cross was getting ready to donate its records from the Spanish flu epidemic to the local historical society. And they needed somebody to transcribe these records. It was a really weird job. And so every day after school, I would walk a couple of miles to this old building and I'd go up into the attic and I would type up these handwritten records. Who had gotten the flu, who had been treated, who had died, like notes about their family. It was weird and fascinating. And while I was working there, they got a grant to do an AIDS awareness program, something they had never done before. And it was sort of a peer-to-peer sex education thing. They hadn't planned it really well, and they didn't have what we at Shift and C might call adequate recruitment strategies, so they couldn't find any participants. But they did have this kid sitting in the attic, me. And they obviously obviously didn't know me all that well because they asked me to do this program. And so I panicked and I told them, no, I'm not gonna do this. And then I went home and I thought about it over the weekend. Like, number one, sex ed seemed kind of subversive. Like, I hadn't forgotten how all those adults had reacted to our little second grade adventure. Number two, if there was anything I thought about more at that age than keeping a low profile, it was sex. And number three, it seemed important. See, our high school didn't offer anything in the way of formal sex education. It wasn't required then. There was no law mandating it. And so all we got was one class from our 9th grade health teacher, Coach Schoaf, the soccer coach. And she showed us a slideshow, like real slides of STDs. Just like close-up pictures of skin and sores. And then she got distracted and went off on this tangent, just very long, very animated tangent about how we should never, ever, ever use OB tampons because they don't have an applicator and we would have to touch ourselves, which would be nasty. And I still remember the gesture she made during this lecture, and I think about it every time I'm in the tampon aisle at Target. And there were future doctors in the room. So I went back to my job on Monday and I told them, yes, I will be an AIDS peer educator. So they gave me some training and a presentation to memorize, and the organizer set up appointments for me to go to all of our high school science classes. And I must have practiced this presentation 100 times in my mirror in my bedroom, and I was still so nervous. What if I froze? What if I forgot everything? What if I turned bright red or cried or did something weird or forgot a word like semen? I was so anxious about it. And then I saw the reaction of my peers. Like, they were interested, they were paying attention. Like, every single kid in this class was paying attention, and they were asking questions and they were getting engaged. And they seemed really, really happy that somebody was willing to share this information with them. And I had been right, this was important. And so I did this for about a year and a half, and they sent me to all the classes at my high school, and then they sent me to other high schools. They still couldn't recruit other people to do this. And then they sent me to like youth groups and churches, and like I became known for this thing. And then one day after my presentation, my principal, Dr. Eagle, was waiting for me out in the hallway. Now, Dr. Eagle was kind of like a movie trope principal. He always seemed kind of irreverent and like he was really on the side of the students and really well liked, and he was a nice guy. And when I got out in the hallway, he said, "You can't do this class anymore. There is a new law in North Carolina, and it says that schools can only talk about abstinence." Now, I got along really well with Dr. Eagle. I got along well with most people when I was willing to interact with them. And despite the fact that we got along pretty well, I've never been a huge fan of authority figures. And I also was not the most tactful communicator as a teenager. And so I looked him straight in the eye, and I looked in the classroom at my peers, and I looked him back in the eye, and I said, "Well, everybody's talking about how Amy gave Jonathan a blowjob at a party on Friday night, and they didn't use a condom, and you can get AIDS from that." And he just stared off into the distance for what felt like a really long time. And then he turned around and walked away. And when he got about halfway down the hallway, he yelled back at me, "Well, if anybody asks you, I told you you were supposed to talk about abstinence." And I kept doing the class until I graduated. And I also managed to find successors, so other kids kept doing the class, even when I was gone. There's a tradition at my high school, or there was back then, that the last edition of the school paper was a fictional account of the graduating class's 10-year reunion. It kind of made up Where Are They Now? And all of the girls were homemakers with lots of kids, and all of the guys were pro athletes or porn stars or race car drivers. The editors were male. And me, it said I was the keynote speaker at this reunion. And it said I was there to talk, of course, about AIDS, and that I brought condoms for everybody. And the way this write-up read, I was like the condom Oprah. It was like, you get condoms, and you get condoms, and you get condoms. And I was so incredibly proud. I was proud that I had done this. I was proud that this is what my friends and my peers recognized me for. And I was proud that I wasn't that shy, awkward kid anymore. In 2009, Shift NC worked with a coalition of organizations and successfully changed North Carolina's sex ed law. It had been in place for almost 15 years, and they replaced the old abstinence-only standards with more comprehensive measures. And about a month after that happened, I started working for Shift NC as communications director, and it was a really meaningful opportunity for me. It was really special. It felt like a little bit of a homecoming, and it felt like I got a chance to give a voice to the thing that gave me a voice. And shortly after that, I got a call from Dr. Eagle, my old high school principal. And he was putting together like a career day sort of thing and asked me to come. And so I went and I talked about what I do, what my job is. I talked about what Shift NC does. And I essentially shared my sex ed story, how participating in this program and how sort of pushing back against Dr. Eagle and making sure that young people got this information had helped me transition from this shy, awkward, anxious kid into a reasonably functioning adult. And it was wonderful. And what did I take with me? Condoms. It was not condoms. This is a nonprofit. I took like trifold brochures. North Carolina forbids the distribution of condoms and contraceptives anywhere on a school campus. Yeah. But that's why you're here tonight. See, our sex ed law in North Carolina has gotten better, but it's not where we need to be. As we heard from Davi, as we heard from Natalie, what's that? Still now, North Carolina can't distribute condoms or contraceptives on school property. And we need young people to be able to get accurate, inclusive, real sex ed, and we need young people to be able to get condoms and contraceptives and testing and PrEP and other sexual and reproductive health services when they need them and when they want them. And we need our schools to be real and inclusive of young people who are LGBT or gender non-conforming or who don't fit into this model that young people are given from the very start. In a minute, we're gonna take a break so that you can run to the bathroom, so you can grab another drink. This is a fundraiser tonight, and the ticket that you bought, we will use that funding to keep doing that hard work of trying to make sex ed and other services better for young people all across North Carolina. And if you feel compelled to give more than what your ticket paid for, we set up a quick giving link to make that easy for you. So you can go to shiftnc.org/story, and there's a secure giving link that you can use on the break or you can use later, and you can know that every single bit you give counts. This is our only plug tonight for giving, but know that we appreciate it so much. So I will let y'all take a quick break, and we will be back in about 10 minutes with more incredible stories. Thank you.